Hi everyone, I'm Shaylin here with Reedsy. Today we're going to talk about how to start writing your book. If you've had an idea for a novel for a while, but you find that you keep just not starting, you're definitely not alone in that. Whether it's the fear of the book not being perfect, feeling like you're not ready to start, just general procrastination, or not knowing how to get started, there are a lot of factors that can hold writers back from taking those initial first steps to start writing their book. So if you're stuck in this wanting to start writing phase, but you keep just not starting your book, here are some tips to help get out of the phase where you're thinking about starting to write a book and actually getting started. Number 1, make a sketch or outline. Some writers do thrive off the possibility of the blank page, but most will feel more confident going into a draft with some idea of where they're going. If you're more of a pantser, someone who doesn't like to outline their books in advance, like me, you might just make kind of a general loose sketch, do some general brainstorming, so you have an idea of where you're going, even if you haven't blocked out all the specific scenes. You might try just generally drawing out your book's beginning, middle, and end, brainstorming the main plot points, just doing some general brainstorming. If you're more of a plotter, someone who likes to outline their books in advance, you might make a more detailed outline where you even block out every chapter or even every single scene. You can also think about the themes or questions that your book is exploring. Do some world building, especially if you're writing in a more world building heavy genre like fantasy, sci-fi, or historical fiction. And do some character sketches or character profiles. There is no right amount of information you need to develop before you start writing. The key is to do as much development before you start writing that you need to feel confident. And if that's to know every single thing about your book before you start writing, then do that work, do that detailed outlining. If that's just a few light bullet points, then do that. Do what you need to feel confident. You may find that a lot of this information changes once you start actually drafting, and that's completely fine. But if you feel stuck, try doing a bit of planning to give yourself some confidence and something clear to write towards. Different books require different amounts of research, but most will require at least a little bit, if not a lot, if you're writing in a genre like historical fiction or hard sci-fi, or really anything that deals extensively with a topic that you're not personally familiar with. Try doing the bulk of your research in advance. Needing to constantly stop to research things can really slow down your drafting process and can also start to become a form of procrastination. But at the same time, there is a balance. Some writers find themselves just researching extensively for years as a way to avoid starting the book. If you feel like that's you and you're really worrying about every single nuance and knowing literally everything beforehand, you might want to just start writing and keep in mind that you always can stop to look up the details. Yes, it can stall your momentum, but it's really not a big deal if you have to stop every so often to look something up. In fact, I probably stop to research things every single time that I write. Know the general information that you need to start writing your book, stuff that impacts the plot, stuff that you need to know for your world building or how your plot is going to unfold. But it's okay if you have to stop and look up the little details or little nuances as you write. It's kind of the same with outlining. Do the amount of research that would make you feel confident. If that's a ton, if that's knowing everything, then do all that first. If that's just kind of knowing the general things you need to know and you're going to do the rest of it on the fly, then go with that. Tip number 3, make a game plan. Many writers benefit from some kind of tangible, measurable goal to motivate them and keep them on track. Figure out your target word count for your book, and then figure out what would be a realistic daily or weekly target word count in order to set a realistic deadline. But if you are making a schedule or setting deadlines like this, make sure to plan for days off. You need time to recharge, and a common mistake is for writers to kind of start really strong out of the gate, right? They start writing their book and they're writing a ton and they think, I can write this much every day until my book is done. And that's probably not going to be true. That initial enthusiasm and energy is going to wear off. You're going to find you need a break. So for most people, keeping up the pace that they were writing at the beginning throughout their entire book is not realistic. Now, not everyone benefits from word count goals, so find a way of setting goals that works for you. I don't like daily or weekly word count goals. I find it makes writing feel assignment-y, it kind of takes the fun out of it. And I find that it really makes me focus on the wrong things. It makes me focus just on hitting the word count and not whether I'm happy with what I'm writing. And it also causes times where if I don't hit the word count, I feel dissatisfied with my writing, even if I would otherwise be happy with what I've written that day. So daily workout goals don't really work for me. I find that they just lead to rushing and disappointment, which are not great things to have happening in your writing process. So what I like to do is work on a more large scale goal system where I set goals for sets of chapters. So aiming to finish this set of 3 chapters by a certain deadline. So very, very broad goals that gives me a lot of flexibility and a lot of wiggle room, which I find is a lot more motivational for me to stay on track without any kind of really nitpicky daily word count, which I'm not a fan of. So find a way of setting goals that works for you. For me, it's something very long term. For other people, it might be something very specific, very daily. You know, they like to have that daily word count that they can hit every single day. So you might want to try experimenting with different things, but find some way of keeping on track that best works for you. Sometimes writers put off writing not because of a lack of ideas, but a lack of ideal writing conditions. You know, we have this ideal in our mind of, oh, I'm gonna write by a window in a nice comfy chair, you know, with no one bothering me, absolute peace and quiet. But how often does this really happen? Right? Almost never. So if you're waiting for the perfect writing conditions, they're probably not going to come up very often, so you have to find ways to create your ideal writing conditions. Put your phone on Do Not Disturb, or put it across the room. You know, tell the people that you live with not to bother you for this period of time, or try not writing in a room with other people. Turn off your Wi-Fi, or you can download an app like Self-Control, which blocks your access to certain websites for certain periods of time, you know, so you won't get distracted going on social media, but you can still research things. Whatever it is that tends to distract you, try to find ways to mitigate that. The thing that distracts me the most is noise, so I like to put on a writing playlist, or if you can't write with music, put on some kind of white noise. You know, invest in noise canceling headphones, whatever it is that tends to distract you, try to find a way to work around that. The next tip is to stack your habits. In order to build a strong writing habit, try habit stacking. This is where you attach a new habit to an existing habit in order to increase the likelihood that the new habit will stick. Let's say you always go for a walk in the morning. You might try to attach a new writing habit to your daily walk so that as soon as you get back from your walk, then you do your writing, no in-between tasks, no room to get distracted. If there's something that you do every single day, try to attach writing to that in order to create a repeatable, sustainable habit that won't just help you get started, but will hopefully help you finish the draft. And you can use the early days of working on your draft to try and establish a long-term habit. The next tip is to sketch out the next scene before you stop writing for the day. This is another tactic that can really help you keep up momentum. When you finish writing for the day, before you log off and close out of your document, just write a couple sentences describing the next scene that you're going to write. This micro outlining practice can be really helpful for pantsers. Instead of having to outline your whole book in advance, just stop and outline the next scene as you go. So when you log on to start writing the next day, you're not stuck trying to figure out what to write or what happens next, because you did that the day before when you're already more in tune with the story. It just makes it a lot easier to get started. Another similar trick that a lot of writers use is to never stop writing at the end of a scene. So always end your writing sessions in the middle of a scene. That way when you start writing again the next day, you're always in the middle of the action, and it's a lot easier to get started than if you were having to start from a brand new scene where maybe you don't really know what happens next. And finally, let your first draft suck. The ultimate key to getting the words out is freeing yourself from the expectation that the first draft will be perfect. A novel is a long thing. You're not going to write a perfect novel. Even if you're a very clean drafter and you tend to write very clean first drafts, the odds of writing a perfect first draft of a novel, a very long piece of work, is pretty much non-existent. It is okay to write bad lines, bad scenes, or even entire chapters. Editing exists for a reason, but getting a first draft done, even if it's a mess, will put you miles ahead of where you would be if you were worrying so much about making the draft perfect that you never ended up writing it. Different writers have a different level of quality that they like to maintain in their first draft. For me, I do like a fairly clean draft, or else I know that the editing feels really overwhelming. If my draft is too messy, then I don't even want to edit it, right? Because editing is a bit harder for me than drafting. It can be very easy to compare your first draft to published books that you've read, but remember that every published book that you read and you love is a published draft that was edited by a professional editing team. It was edited by the author a bunch of times, and the first draft was probably just as messy as your first draft is now. So it's okay to let it be a mess. It's okay if it sucks, just let your first draft suck, because you'll be making a lot more progress if you write a bad first draft than if you don't write a first draft at all, because you're worried it's not perfect. So those are some tips to help you start writing your book. Thank you so much for watching. Remember to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss any new videos from us. We've got new writing, editing, and publishing tips every Tuesday and Friday. Until next time, bye!